Hello, everybody, and welcome to my podcast, Miss Fiara Speaks. My name is Fiara Pickett. I am a child care provider in Chicago, Illinois, and I created this podcast with the intent of creating a safe space for open and honest conversations. But before we dive into why I created this podcast, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about who I am and what led me to starting this podcast. So, I am a child care provider, and I have been working with children for a little over 6 years. It really started off as me just needing a summer job at the young age of 21, and my mom saw a Care.com commercial, and she was like, "Hey, you should try that. You're great with kids. Put an application out there and just see where it goes." So I created a Care.com profile, and I started to apply for jobs, just date nights or long-term positions, just to see where things would go. But I quickly figured out that it wasn't as easy as the commercial made it seem, because there are a lot of child care providers, and parents try their best to filter through to see who would be best for their family. It was a long shot, but I applied for a lady who needed emergency child care because the child care provider that she had before me quit without much notice, and she was starting school soon. She was a teacher, and she just needed somebody ASAP. We chatted on Care.com for a little bit. She invited me over for an in-person interview. I was hired, and I started the next Monday. When I started that job, I had no idea what being a child care provider fully entailed. I knew I would have to teach these children, educate these children, play with these children, and give them the best experience in life that I could. But I quickly came to the realization that it was a lot more on my plate than just being the best child care provider. That being African American mattered in this industry. I would go to the park, and it would be hard to make friends with other nannies because they were already in their groups. I called them the nanny cliques, and it was hard to infiltrate. So I made the decision of I'll just be a loner. It'll just be me and the kids that I'm taking care of. I won't need to make friends. I'll be a loner, because the looks that I would get, the comments that were made, it made me very uncomfortable, and I did not have the confidence that I have now to stand up for myself in those situations. For instance, there were times where I would wear my natural hair, and there would be comments made by other nannies that my hair wasn't professional. And at the time, it hurt my feelings because people thought that way. But I have lived a life of being African American for 21 years. By that time, I've heard all the comments imaginable about my natural hair. So someone else commenting about it was just water off of my back. It hurt because those comments were made, but it did not tear down my confidence any. I just did not want to be confrontational around children at a park, so I would always take the higher road and walk away. But I worked for an amazing woman who would listen to me when I came in from the park and say, "Hey, this happened," and she would encourage me, "Hey, it's not you, it's them. You were the better person. You walked away from it. You're a great example for my kid." And having someone to have that dialogue with was amazing. But also, being a child care provider and being African American comes with so many negative connotations. And whether the comments came from family or articles that I read online, it made me uncomfortable to proudly say, "Hey, I'm a nanny." Because people would ask, "Well, why are you a nanny? You can do anything in the world. Why do you, as a black woman, want to watch Caucasian children?" And for me, I didn't see, "Hey, I'm black and I'm watching white children." I saw it as, "Hey, these families hired me to care for their children, to educate their children, to love their children. I'm here for that job." But the more that I thought about it, it made me very self-conscious to say, I'm not going to openly admit to my job on Facebook or to outsiders that aren't my family or my friends, because it's embarrassing to explain being black and watching children outside of your own race, because the conversation of slavery comes into play so quickly, because we know the roles that black women played in the homes of their masters. If you watched The Master's Child, you were labeled a mammy, and there were negative connotations that are still attached to being black and a nanny. And the word mammy comes around, and I'll touch bases on that a little later. But me myself, I was very ashamed of my job in the beginning, because I was like, hey, it does come with negative feedback, it does come with negative connotations. I don't know how people will accept my job or what I do. So I kept it to myself, and I was very aware of how other people might feel. So I just didn't want to have that conversation. I was very embarrassed in the beginning. But these people that I worked for were so amazing. They treated me like family. It wasn't like I was going to work, clocking hours with your kid. Here you go, I'm out the door. It was conversations of who are you? Where are you from? Tell me about your goals, your ambitions. What can we do to help you? What can we do to help you progress in your life and in your dreams? And being at the young age of 21, I was like, okay, I love kids. Let me go to school for this. Let me get a degree. And the families that I work for were so receptive and loving, and they were like, okay, you want to go to school? We back you up. You want to go to class after work? I didn't have a car at the time. We'll Uber you there. You need to study? Do it during nap time. You don't have to do anything but better yourself when you have downtime. And that is what drove me to continue to get my education. And the older I got, the more mature I got, I started taking my role in these kids' lives so much more seriously, because I just wasn't their child care provider. I was like family to them. And in the eyes of a child, they didn't see me as a worker. They saw me as family. Like, this lady comes over every day, helps take care of me when my parents aren't here. She loves me. She cares for me. And I love that feeling of personally having hands-on time with these kids and watching them develop, listening to them say their first words, hearing how their enunciation of their words progress over time. Something as simple as the progression of how they say my name, it was a reward within itself. So I continued through school, and I figured out ways to incorporate my schooling into bettering educating these kids. How can I tie what I'm learning in class to what I do on a day-to-day? And the families that I worked for were very receptive to any ideas that I had, any places that I wanted to go, the walks and being outdoors. That it made work so much fun. And being a nanny was a reward within itself. Every day was a constant reward. You always got hugs, you always got kisses, you always got told thank you. And kids are just so amazing and pure and innocent that it just made me want to continue. But like all things, all great things come to an end. And I quickly learned that not everybody felt the way or treated people the way that the families that I worked for in the past did. And not that I ever forgot who I am or what I am or the color of my skin. I just forgot how it felt to work for people who treated you like the color of your skin. So yes, I've encountered bad families, like I've encountered great families, but in all things I've had to learn how to maneuver through them as professionally as possible, and I've taken great pride in doing that. And it comes with its struggles. It definitely does. Being a child care provider, being in somebody's home for 8 to 10 hours a day, being with their children, then you have to interact with parents and different personalities, and not every day is a good day. And I've learned how to properly navigate those situations through good and bad experiences. So aside from me being a child care provider, I would say about 3.5, almost 4 years ago, there was a very upsetting letter that was delivered to the homes of one of the families that I worked for. And it started what we call the Stand Up to Hate Playdate. The letter was it was anonymous, and it was very upsetting because it targeted me being African American, working in the neighborhood, and also working for a Caucasian family. The person who wrote the letter felt as if the people that I worked for were my slave owners. I was the mammy, and I was no longer welcomed in that neighborhood. That was the wake-up call. A wake-up call in the sense of a reminder that everybody does not see you as the amazing person that you are. Sometimes people see you strictly for the color of their skin. And I've always known that I'm African American. I've had experience of being judged by the color of my skin before. But I was living in a bubble of, okay, I'm in an environment where I feel safe, I feel loved, forgetting that there are people who were seeing me around and watching me and was just like, hey, we don't like her. Whether it was one person or many, I don't know. I have not read the full letter. I don't know the origin of the letter, all the words that were used. All I know is that bottom line, it was because I was black. I wasn't welcome in the neighborhood. I was referred to as a mammy, and the people I worked for were referred to as my slave owners. And it's not funny. I'm just very shocked that as I'm repeating it, that those words were ever even used. And people felt as if race was not a problem. Like, that's what's shocking to me, is as I think about it more and more, and some of the comments that were repeated after me was just like, well, how do you know it was race driven? And it's like, well, the terminology that was used shows that it was very racially driven, regardless of who wrote it or how they wrote it. Bottom line, it was about me being black and not being welcomed. And there were a ton of insults basically surrounding that. So the families that I worked for were very protective in the sense of wanting to keep me optimistic. So they were like, let's not focus on the letter. We're not going to give you the letter, because if we give you this letter, these words are going to continue to haunt you. And I've never read the letter, but those 3 words of mammy, slave owners, and not belonging, I mean, those 3 phrases, not words, haunt me. And those are the only 3 phrases that I know were in that letter. If I had read that whole letter, I have no idea where I would be right now, because I would forever be haunted with what's in the entire letter. Right now, I only know those 3 phrases, and that alone haunts me. That alone is always in the back of my mind, or resurfaces to the front of my mind, and I'm constantly thinking about it on and off. But they told me, hey, we don't think the letter is something you should focus on. Let's focus on what we're going to do about it. And they were amazing in creating a response that was, hey, we love her. We want her in the neighborhood. And if anybody in this neighborhood agrees with us, please attend this Stand Up to Hate Playdate. Our response to this letter is not giving it life. We won't talk about it. We won't share it with everybody. We're just going to focus on the reaction. And our reaction is, if you see her, let's love on her and show her support. And let's plan a day where we all can come out and say, hey, we live in this neighborhood. We don't agree with whoever wrote that. We want you here. We want you to feel welcomed. Let's bring our children together and play. So that's what we did. And the first year, it was very overwhelming because there was a lot of cameras and interviews. But overall, the outreach and the outpouring support and love that we received at that play date was very moving. And it kept me going. Like, every time I thought about that play date, I was like, the support, the love, and the care from the neighborhood made me want to come back to work the next day. It didn't make me run the other way. So every year I still worked in that neighborhood. So I was like, let's keep doing it, because I still have to work here. Whoever wrote that probably still lives somewhere around here. Let me continue to build a foundation of support. Let me keep building upon that foundation. If we can continue to get parents and families and kids and child care providers together to play diversely, let's do it. So we did, and the second year was amazing. The third year was amazing. This year will be the fourth year, and I pray that we can get to a safe phase where we can have another play date, because the ideas that I have for this fourth play date is going to make it stand out from the rest. And what I mean by that is, when we always had the play date, we always focused on the kids and having them play diversely. So that means neighbors of all walks of life. Bring your children, let them interact together. Let's get a neighborhood musician out here to sing and play and interact with the kids. Let's get soccer balls and soccer nets, and let's get whatever we can get donated. Whoever would like to donate their time and equipment out here for the children to play together safely. And each year we did that. I've always created buttons to give to the neighbors to say, hey, we stand in solidarity. We support you. We love you. We're going to wear these buttons to show that we are an ally of you. So we always did play. We always did buttons. We always did music. This year, I want to add resources, because the conversation is so thick right now that I say, now that we have your attention, what can I do with it? Now that the conversation is out there that racism still exists, it never went anywhere. It was only silence for whoever felt that it was silence. Me as a black woman, I know it was never silence. But for some people, they didn't hear about it, they didn't experience it, so racism was silence to them, and it no longer existed. So I want to provide resources for parents and child care providers who would like to say, hey, how can I have a conversation about race, social injustices, oppression with children safely and respectfully, without completely ripping apart their innocence and, confusing them and leaving them with unanswered questions? How can I diversify my kids' reading library? How can I diversify the things that my children watch? How can I add diversity to the music that we listen to, the food that we eat? What are resources that I might be overlooking? How can I change what I'm already doing? Or how can I add to what I'm already doing? And when I say resources, I don't mean here's a kid's book about Dr. King. That's great. But we also need books that shows different skin colors. Like, for instance, the book of One Snowy Day. It's a book, and the character is African American, or his skin is darker. So I'm assuming that he's African American. But he's a kid with a different skin complexion than, let's say, one of his readers. It exposes that child to a different culture, a different image of what their normal might be. Or if it's a book that talks about food from different countries. So if they ever experience somebody from a different culture, they won't be so weirded out or confused by why is their food different than ours. It might smell different, it might look different. If you expose them to it through literature, when they see it in person, they'll be better prepared and equipped to handle new things. If it's a book about disabilities, when they see a child or an adult or anybody with a disability, they won't be afraid of the equipment that person might have, whether it's a wheelchair or crutches or some type of physical disability. They won't be afraid. They won't point. They won't ask uncomfortable questions in front of that person. If you prepare your child from literature, because there are books that shows these images, and you have that conversation with your child before they interact with somebody different, I feel it'll help create less awkward situations. You're basically raising a socially aware child. And at this play date, I would like to provide parents with just a sheet of resources of how to diversify things that we already have with our children, whether it's toys of different colors, books that show different colors or different foods or different ethnicities, music from different backgrounds, expose them to different foods so they can try new things. And when you go to that restaurant, you can explain the culture that food is from and create open and honest conversations with children. One thing that I say, and I say it with so much love in my heart, is that children are our future. We have to prepare this next generation the best way that we can, because I'm 27 and I've listened to stories from my grandparents, from my dad, from my mom about social injustices that they experienced at my age. And I'm sharing with them social injustices and discrimination that I'm experiencing at my age. I don't want my children to come to me 27 years from now and say, "Hey, Mom, I was called the N-word," or "Hey, Mom, we're doing this march because Black lives still don't seem to matter in this country." I want to help the next generation be better than the generations that are already here. I feel like if we educate them, we have those hard and awkward conversations with them, it will create socially aware children. And in my mind, I feel by doing that, you can lessen bullying, you can lessen you can create children who will not bully, but stand up for children who might be bullied, because they know, okay, that's wrong. I can either sit back and let something wrong happen, or I can go get a teacher, I can go get an adult, or I can intervene and say, "Hey, that's not nice. I'm sorry that happened to you. Will you be my friend?" Let's create children who want to help and be better. And we're raising children that are socially aware. And I know I've said that a couple of times, but I'm a strong believer in that, because the kids that I have in my life are socially aware because of the things that we've experienced together. While on the job, we've seen things, we've talked about things, they've been to the play date, so the conversation comes from there. They have a African American child care provider or a person in their life, so questions comes up of, are you brown because you drink coffee? You know, your skin color is darker than mine. How does that happen? How did that happen? And with the help of their parents, we've always found the best way to properly answer those questions. So I want to take some of those resources, some of the things that I've done with previous families and kids that I've been around, and spread that widely to parents who might not know what to do and who might not have the proper resources to figuring out how to do it. I know that I have a very unique voice because I don't have children, but I'm around children enough to know how their brain works. I've studied psychology for 3 years, and I've also studied childhood education for 4 years. I've had a very long college experience because I did not know what I wanted to major in. But with the majors that I did major in, psychology and early childhood education, I feel like I have a unique voice. From my education to my years of experience to the families that I've worked for, and just the research that I've naturally done, because I want to make the next generation better than the generations that have already been here. Outside of the play date, I have recently started a button business where I create pins that not only have messages that allies can wear and show solidarity, but I also have pins that show people of color to be proud. And I'll say this because I am a woman of color. I am a Black woman. There are times when you feel that being Black is hard. There's nothing that you can do right. There's nothing that you can say. There's nothing that you can do to stop people from judging you by the color of their skin, by the color of your skin. There's nothing that you can do perfectly. You can be an upstanding citizen. You can do everything right, but you can always run across that wrong person who will see you as nothing more than what the color of your skin is. So it has been hard. It has been challenging these past few weeks with everything that has transpired in America. And it makes it hard. And not that you ever feel ashamed, but you question why. Why do people see us this way? Why can't we all just get along? We've been fighting this fight since 1619. Why haven't we progressed? Why are we still here? And I want people of color, and I want Black people especially, to feel empowered in the skin that we're in. I want Black women to know that we hold our crowns high. We adjust other women's crowns, but we also take care of ourselves. And we need those words of affirmation to say, hey, you are a beautiful Black queen. Here's a button that shows that. Hey, Black boy, it's okay to be joyous. It's okay to think happy thoughts. I know you have the weight of what the world will think of you one day on your shoulders, but continue to be young and happy and show that joy. So I have buttons for everybody, and I can create a button that says and shows anything. And that's been my only pick-me-up these past couple of weeks and even months. I personally, a little more about me. I got engaged 2.5 years ago. I was supposed to get married in August to my lovely fiance, who's a registered nurse. And COVID happened. So in March, we made the decision to push our wedding back a full year. So we'll be getting married August of 2021. So I've planned a wedding for 2 years that is not happening this year. And it was a depressing moment, a realization that something that I've dreamed of since I was 5 won't be happening. But I know it's for the safety and the well-being for everybody that I want at my wedding. I want this wedding to be everything that we planned it to be. And if I can't have it that way, I am willing to wait, because I'm with the love of my life and he and I aren't going anywhere. So waiting another year is not the end of the world. Then after, the wedding was postponed, everything in America just reared its ugly head, and it made time so much harder. And I felt that there was no more hope. I was losing hope in this country as a Black woman. I kept telling myself, do I want to birth a child, carry them for 9 months, and bring them into a world where I'm not certain if they will be killed simply because of the color of their skin? And as I was losing hope, I kept telling myself, this is not the way to think. This is not the way to be. There has to be. There's a higher power that I know is protecting and guiding us, but we have to do the work. So Fiara, what are you going to do? Are you going to sit back and feel hopeless, or are you going to do something to give yourself hope and hopefully give other people hope? And amazingly, I wanted to give away buttons, and I was like, okay, I have plenty of buttons from our last play date. I want to give them away so people can wear a silent message on their body, silent to where they don't have to speak and say, hey, I see you, you matter. Their button says it all. And it picked up, and people wanted more buttons, and I just started an Etsy account, and I started pushing out as many buttons as I can. And to date, I've sold over 500 buttons with positive messages of Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ plus matter, unity matters, diversity matters. Yes, everybody matters, but those that are oppressed and need liberation matters right now. And those are the people that we need to continue to talk about. So those buttons have reached widely to numerous of people of numerous backgrounds. And I can honestly say that I'm very happy and I'm very hopeful that we can continue to get positive messages out there, because as a person of color, it can get very depressing to constantly getting on your phone or turning on the TV and it's story after story, video after video, conversation after conversation of what's going on in America. I get it. Let's talk about it. I want to talk about it. But it can be depressing at the same time if all we're talking about is the negative. If all we're talking about is the bad. There is good that's happening in the midst of all this bad. But at the same time, how do we stop the bad from happening? How do we lessen these incidents from happening? I want to talk about the change. I want to talk about being hopeful. I want to talk about being progressive, because continuing to talk about what happened, we all know what happened. We've seen what happened. It's very obvious what happened. How do we prevent it from continuing to happen? And the more that I ask people that question, the more that I get the I don't know. I don't know how to have this conversation with my child. I don't know how to explain what's happening to my child, because we are not African American. I was never prepared to have this conversation. Not that anyone is. Being a person of color, being a black woman, I watched the Emmett Till documentary at the ripe age of 5. I remember my dad having it on, and my siblings and I were just in the background, mesmerized at the TV, horrified by the images, listening in detail to the stories. And as clear as day, we know what happened was wrong. We hear people saying it's wrong. No justice, no convictions. People are walking free. An innocent child is dead. And being black, living in Chicago, having family that lives in Mississippi, I was terrified. I never wanted to visit Mississippi because I didn't want to be the next Emmett Till. But as a black kid in Chicago, those were conversations that my parents had with us. Having conversations about race was just as open and honest as having a conversation about good touch and bad touch. Both were very relevant and open and honest in our household. We had to have that talk. We had to have both talks. So as a person of color, I know how important it is to have those conversations with your children. But being a child care provider and working for people who don't look like me, I know at the same time how awkward it is and how unpredictable, and there's no rule book or guidelines to how to have that conversation with a non-African American child. How do I explain empathy to a child? And I get it. It's confusing, even for adults. And it's uncomfortable. But we need to start having those uncomfortable conversations to, again, raise socially aware children. And that's one of the many conversations that I want to talk about on my podcast. I'd like to talk about life in general. I'd like to talk about experiences that I've had at work that were uncomfortable and racially motivated. I'd like to talk about social injustice and how we can try to raise kids and raise and talk to people in general, children and adults, about what's happening. I want to provide resources for adults and children to say, hey, here are books, here are movies, here are literature, music, museums, here are resources that are available to you that you might not have known about. I want to talk about things that are uncomfortable. And I get it. Not every person of color wants to talk about uncomfortable things. Not every person of color wants to share resources because it's exhausting. We have these resources. We know these resources exist. We can't walk around oblivious. So why do I have to relay information to a non-person of color about resources, or have an uncomfortable conversation with a non-person of color because they don't have anybody else to talk to? I'm speaking for Fiara Pickett when I say I don't mind. I don't mind sharing resources if I have them, or helping you figure out where to get the proper resources. I don't mind being asked the tough questions. I don't mind explaining why saying I don't see color is problematic. I don't mind having conversations with people that are progressive and educational. Now, I will never have time to converse with somebody who just wants to be problematic. If you do not want to change, if you do not want the information, I'm not going to waste time giving it to you. I know there are people out there who just likes to say problematic things. I have a buttons page, and there was a random guy who commented, "Can you make me a whites only button?" I don't need to explain to you why that's problematic. Saying Black Lives Matter is not saying blacks only. That's saying, hey, black people have been in this country long enough, have fought hard enough, and for some reason our lives still don't matter. Black people were brought into this country as slaves. We were not viewed as people. We were viewed as animals, cattle, and we were traded and bought and sold like we were animals. There were no value of life to us. We were nothing. And then for slaves to be free, happy Juneteenth. I was going to say June 19th. This is the same. But when slaves were free, it wasn't that we magically became human in the eyes of our oppressors and our masters. We were still nothing. And they wanted to keep us and treat us as if we were nothing. And that has generationally been passed down, which is why we're still saying, hey, why don't I matter? I'm not asking, why do I have to ask to matter? Why do I even have to say, hey, as a black person, I should matter? I should not be discriminated against. I shouldn't be treated differently. I shouldn't be targeted. I should be treated as a normal human being in this country, in this world, in society. So to ask me to create a whites only button is very problematic. And I'm not going to hold a conversation with you why it's problematic, because you know it's problematic. You just want to stir the pot and ruffle feathers. And I don't have the time or energy for people like that. Now, I also have a Facebook page for nannies called Nannies United, where I'd like for nannies to have open, honest, and safe conversations about things that we experience in the workplace, and how it can be difficult. So on that page, if somebody comments, I don't see color, we all bleed the same blood, but they didn't mean it that way, right? They didn't mean that color doesn't exist. I'm willing to have a conversation with you and say, hey, unless you're colorblind, you see my color. You see that I am brown skinned. Just as you see I am a woman, you see the color of my skin. It's how you treat the color, how you treat me, regardless of the color of my skin, is what matters. It's how you treat me. Not that you don't see my color. It's that you are aware that I am human above all things, and you treat me as I'm human. Not that you treat me as less than because I'm black. That's what matters. It matters how you treat me. You see my color, you acknowledge my color, because without seeing my color, you aren't seeing who I am. Because I will say loud and proud, I am a black woman. I fight 2 fights in this country. the fight for women equality and the fight of Black people and the oppression that we experience. I cannot tear one from the other. I cannot only be a woman and I cannot only be Black. I am a Black woman. I love my skin. I love my culture. I love my people. I love all people, but especially Black people, because we have to be resilient. We have to be strong. We experience so much at so young over simply being Black, over simply having darker complexions than other people. I live in my pride. I don't live ashamed to be what I am or who I am. I'd like to educate people on my pride because I am proud to be Black. Right now, I will honestly say I am not proud to be an American, because the way our country was founded upon makes me ashamed. The real history of our country, the real history of my people, the real history of oppression makes me ashamed to be American. I am a proud Black woman. I live in America. But I am aware that our country needs a lot of work. We can no longer sweep social injustice and inequality under the rug. We can't say not my problem. We have to say whether or not I am Black, whether or not I am a part of the LGBT community, whether or not I'm an immigrant, whether or not I'm a refugee, regardless of the issue. We are all human. This is all of our problems. Let's band together and fix them. That's who I am. That's what I believe in. That's how I think and how I feel from the bottom of my heart. I'm not perfect. I'm not always right, regardless of what, I think. I know I'm not always right. I know things happen in life. Mistakes happen. I may say something that might be offensive and I may not realize it at the time. But I try my best to think before I speak. I try my best to get control of my emotions and not let it get the best of me. I try my best to handle situations as openly and honestly and authentically as I possibly can. Like I said, this is my first podcast. This was just a small introduction of who I am, my background, a little bit about my thoughts and my beliefs, and my mission for this podcast. My mission is to reach as many people who are open-minded and want to have and hear conversations about real-world problems. We're dealing with COVID. I'm dealing with COVID. I had to cancel my wedding. We're dealing with real-life situations on our day-to-day. What I deal with while at work, my ethnicity and issues that I face because of it. Social injustice, sharing resources for parents and children, having uncomfortable conversations in a safe space. This is a safe space for those conversations. This is a safe space to ask questions, and hopefully I'll do my best to answer. This is me wearing my heart on my sleeve, saying I want to do better. I no longer want to ask people, when is change coming? I want to be a part of the change that I know is coming. Change is upon us, regardless if we see it or not. I can feel it. I have hope again. And it's not me giving myself hope. It's I look for the feel-good stories. That's what I call them, the feel-good stories. The stories of children making bracelets, the stories of people helping to rebuild communities, the stories of protesters and marchers banding together, police officers communicating with protesters, people wearing their heart on their sleeves, trying their best to make a change. Whether it's lawmakers, whether it's councilmen and women, regardless of who it is, doing something that is going to better our country, better society, and better this world. That's what gives me hope. And I don't want to just sit back and wait for somebody to do something. I want to know that I did the best that I could. When I have my children and I talk to my children, I want to say, hey, this is what your mom did. Your mom was a part of the fight in a different way. She didn't march every march. She didn't protest all the time. But here's what she did. And here are the people that she reached. Here are some of the conversations that she had. And I hope that what I'm doing and the small outreach that I have makes a difference in somebody's lives. If it's just one person, if I inspire or ignite a personal conversation, or if somebody asks me a question, I just hope that I create change, because one person is better than none. And I feel like I'm doing something. I feel like I have a voice. I feel like I have something to say. So why not say it? Why do I have to wait for somebody else to do it? Why do I have to wait for anybody else to save us? Why can't I be a part of the heroes that are out here already? Real heroes don't wear capes. We bleed and we fight peacefully and progressively. And that's who I am. That's my mission in life. And I just hope that my message is received. And I will try my best to push out a podcast every Sunday. I know today's Friday, but it's Juneteenth, and I felt very motivated to do it today and start the conversation today. I hope to at least put out my first podcast about, I'll start with resources for children. I'll make that my first podcast. Hopefully I can have it up and out no later than June 21st, which is this upcoming Sunday. So I want to leave everybody with a positive message of peace, love, and unity, knowing that there are brighter days ahead of us, knowing that we can and will work together in making this world a better and safer place for everyone. My name is Fiara Pickett. I will say it now because I say it a lot. My name is not pronounced how it's spelled. My parents were very creative when creating my name. We will have a podcast about names, because that's a big thing for me, because a lot of people don't say my name right, and I'm not always quick to correct them, because I'm very, not that I'm ashamed of my name, but I just feel like it's useless work to stand there and try to pronounce my name to somebody else. But I also know it's a respect thing. My parents took great pride in naming me, and I should make sure that everybody says my name correctly. So that will be a podcast within itself. But our next conversation will be about resources and having the hard and uncomfortable conversation with children. I will have my first guest, my sister, who is a kindergarten teacher with 2 children of her own, about how she had the conversation with her children who are African American. But I would like her input, since she is a mother and she has had to have those conversations. She is a kindergarten teacher, so she does know how to have that conversation with children outside of our own race. So she will be my first guest. We will have this conversation on Sunday, June 21st. I hope that you guys enjoy this introduction of myself, and I will be back on Sunday. I hope that everybody have a beautiful weekend. I hope everybody is having a conversation about Juneteenth with their children and finding a way to celebrate. And let's remember peace, love, and unity. Peace, love, and unity. And kids are our future. As Whitney Houston said it best, let's teach them well and let them lead the way. Let's let the children lead us to a better future. I will talk to you guys again on Sunday. Have a great day.